Take it away, Julie.
Okay, our presenter this evening has a varied background. This bio was in our newsletter, and I think it deserves repeating this evening. Sarah Robb Grieco is Northeast Regional Manager for the Old Growth Forest Network, the only national network in the United States of protected old growth native forests where the public can experience their beauty and biodiversity. In her 5 years with the network, she has facilitated the addition of over 40 northeastern forests. She has 15 years of experience in nonprofit leadership, including running a watershed project in Philadelphia to clean up some of the city's most severely urbanized waterways, and co-directing a national intergenerational dance theater company. Sarah holds a BA in biology from Vassar College and an MFA in dance performance and choreography from the University of Colorado at Boulder. What a varied, skillful lady. Um, a Massachusetts native, Sarah presently lives with her family in Andover, Massachusetts. Please help me welcome Sarah Robb Grieco.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, John, for all your help. I'm happy to meet you all and so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for joining us tonight. I come to this work as a lifelong lover of nature and people. And for me, this is a beautiful way to bring those two things together. So thank you for joining me and thank you for being here. So let me get myself situated. So we are going to talk about old growth forests. We're going to talk about what they are. What is old growth? We are going to talk about why they're so important. And then I want to cover some of who the Old Growth Forest Network is and how we do the work that we do to protect old growth forests, what we're doing there. And then everybody always wants to know where the Old Growth Forest Network designated forests are. So I can't cover every single one in New York State, but I'm going to try to give you a smattering of the old growth forests across the state. And then after you've seen all those glorious pictures, you're going to want to get involved. That's my plan. So I will talk to you about ways that you can get involved with your forests and with the Old Growth Forest Network if you so choose. So, hold on. I didn't share my screen yet. Let me do that for you. That would be helpful. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Okay, there's my list. That's what we're going to do. And here we go. So, what is old growth? The concept of old growth really comes from the idea that a forest is dynamic, that it's changing through time and it's progressing through these different stages. So when I'm standing in a forested area around New England or New York, I know that it started out over here on the left-hand side of your screen as grasses and forbs, weeds and wildflowers, things that love the sun. And then over time, the brambles will start to come in, right? You've got your raspberries and blackberries, your other sun-loving plants. And then from there, the white pines whose seedlings love the sun and they're good with poor soils. And then as they grow up and start to create shade, we start to get our hardwoods. Those can seed and take root in the shade of the white pines and grow up into more mature forests. So that's sort of the basic cycle, right? And traditionally, old growth had been considered kind of the climax stage at the end of this linear process. It starts little and it gets big and old, and that's a linear thing, and the old ones are the old growth, right? But forests are not linear. Forests are anything but linear. And so, really, when we're thinking about old growth, we need to think about the fact that it's made up of this series of disturbances. So, by disturbances, I mean fire or insects or storms or logging. These are things that will open up space in the forest. It will knock down some trees or burn down some trees, and then we get an opening. And in that opening, we go back to the beginning of this cycle. We get our brambles and we get our white pines, and then it starts over again just in that one spot. So it's this layered diversity. My dad, I have a little analogy for you. My dad had a desk job growing up, and he wore a suit to work, and in his spare time when he would get home on the weekends, he loved to do stonemasonry and work in the yard and stuff like that, and he had one pair of jeans, and this one pair of jeans he would wear every single time he did that outdoor work. And obviously, it got some holes in it. And then he patched those holes with more jeans. And then those patches got holes. And then those patches got holes. And on and on and on and on. So by the time I was in high school, this one pair of jeans was this like thick, nubbly, bumpy, weird fabric, right? It had strings hanging off it, and it had thin places and thick places, and just bizarre. Um, Beautiful. I was super excited to wear them as a teenager in high school. Um, but I will tell you, they were not very comfortable because they were so lumpy and weird. But anyway, um, basically, I think of old growth forests as that kind of a patchwork. But the holes aren't just holes, right? They're living, breathing, growing, changing. So down trees aren't just dead wood, they're nutrients for the soil, they're food for the worms and fungi, they're habitat for insects and animals, they're substrate for the next generation of plant life and all the other life that it supports. So this process, cycling over and over and over and over again in an old growth forest, it creates this very complex, very rich ecosystem, both above ground and below ground. And these forests, these very special
Use bed in here.
old forests that have had
Mikey,
enough time for all of that to
Mikey,
go on, are the ones that
Mikey.
we are promoting and protecting at the Old Growth Forest Network. I'm hearing somebody's voice. There we go. That's better. So organizations and institutions across the country often have different definitions of when that old growth status begins or what indicates it. And that's partly because every old growth forest looks a little different depending on where it is in the world or on the landscape. So you can imagine that the Oregon redwoods are very different old growth forests than the old growth forests in New York or the old growth forests in Patagonia or in Australia, right? All of these are very, very different landscapes, and the old growth there is going to look very different. And it even looks different just on the scale of a single mountainside. So in this image, you can imagine that if you're way up at the top of the mountain here where my cursor is on this peak, where the wind is blowing and there's hot sun and weather and probably rocky, poor soils, old growth forest up here is going to look very, very different than old growth forest that grows up here in the valley where it's shaded and moist along the side of this stream that's coming down. And even that, if we go down here into the floodplain, this is moist, but it's wide open. And that's going to look really, really different than those other two. So even on this one mountain, even south side versus north side, the old growth on this mountain is going to look different. So it's hard to define exactly what old growth, what marks that point as a if you're thinking worldwide, but there are some very general sort of common unifying factors across old growth forests that we can certainly talk about. So the most obvious one is big old trees. If you're seeing big old trees, you're probably in an old forest. Wide ones, tall ones, those are a pretty good indicator that the forest is pretty old. But I will say that there are certainly forests out there with very tiny, tiny trees that are still very, very old. And that just depends on where they've grown up and what the conditions are around that forest. And then old growth forests are notoriously messy. They do not clean up their rooms. They have all kinds of ways that they get messy. Um, One of them, if you look up into the treetops from below, you're going to see some oddly shaped trees in an old forest. You're going to see, if you look at this image on the left, where this branch comes out kind of like an elbow and then goes straight across. It's very, very different than the other branches in that tree. And it's got these little sprouts coming out from the side of it. This tree clearly has been through something. It had to go around something. It had something laying on it at some point. It also, I'm looking, the bark here is messed up as well. It's been through some stuff. This is an older tree. And this one on the right too, you can see these very weird, like lumpy, this little U shape here. That tree had to grow around something or something was laying on it at some point while it was growing. So you can see it in the branches. You can also see it in the trunks. We've all seen trees like this that had to grow over something or under something in order to keep going, and that something is no longer with us, but the tree holds that shape. It's really, really cool. And same over here on the right-hand side with this trunk that I don't know, probably had some kind of insect gall or something inside it when it was a teeny tiny thing, and through time has grown up and become this beautiful odd shape. So trees in old growth forests often don't look like the ones we draw when we're kids. Another thing that's a good indicator of an older forest is standing dead trees or snags. These are great habitat, great nesting sites, great food is in there. That's a pretty good indicator. We love it when they're there because they're providing homes and food for lots of different creatures. And then coarse woody debris, which is just a fancy word for trees on the ground. So these are trees that have fallen, the trunks and the branches and the limbs are on the ground, and they are, again, really great habitat for so many different species, whether it's rodents or insects or anything else. And these slowly decompose and return carbon and other nutrients to the soil, enriching the forest for future generations of life. So if we sort of take in this scene and then we go to this next scene, you can imagine that eventually those logs from the previous picture are going to look like these. They're going to be moss covered. They're going to start to kind of melt into the earth. They're going to decompose and become our nurse logs, literally nursing the next generation of life in the forest. You can see mosses, you can see ferns, you can even see little seedlings coming up. Sometimes you'll be in the forest and you'll see some trees kind of all lined up in a row, and you'll know that those trees weren't planted like that, but you can see that they came up on the same nurse log next to each other. It's kind of neat. And then another thing that we see is tip-up mounds. Sorry, tip-ups. So this is where trees have fallen and the root ball has been torn up out of the ground, and the roots are now sticking straight up. And this is incredible microhabitat for all kinds of things. There's all kinds of cracks and crevices in here, and the water now is flowing down into it from up here instead of where it was coming before. So if you're seeing this in a forest, it's likely could be an older forest. And over time, it's going to do the same thing that the nurse logs do. I don't think we call them nurse tip-ups, but that's kind of what they become. Um, And eventually they also decompose, go into the soil, and they contribute to the next old growth indicator, which we call pit and mound topography. Sometimes people call it cradles and pillows. That's when these tip ups or the nurse logs, they've created a lump in the surface of the forest. And you can imagine too that where that tip up happened, where that root ball was pulled out of the earth, it pulled up a lot of material with it, right? A lot of soil and a lot of rocks that it then deposited right here where the tip up is, but it also left a hole on the other side. So over time, if this happens, um, over decades and over acres, you start to see this topography of pits and mounds. And it really creates these rich microclimates and microhabitats for other species. And it's really quite a phenomenal thing to see when you can really see it. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see because you don't know what's a rock and what's a pit and mound. Um, but when you can really see it, it's very, very clear and very, very cool. So, in terms of the messiness of a forest, messiness equals complexity, and that's really what we're talking about. An old growth, a really old forest is going to have different types of trees. It's going to have different ages of trees. It's going to have different canopy layers, right? It's going to have tall ones, medium ones, small ones. It's going to have ground cover of some sort. It's going to have some standing dead trees. It'll have coarse woody debris on the forest floor, and these openings with sunlight. And meanwhile, the soils are getting richer and richer, and the root system is becoming more and more complex. And that complexity is what we're talking about when we're talking about old growth forests. And this is an artist's rendering, obviously, that I really love. that that kind of shows the idea of the mycorrhizal fungal networks that are under the ground. And so when we talk about all this complexity above ground that we can see, we need to imagine and know that there's the same amount of complexity going on under the ground as well. Um, Many of you may know Suzanne Simard's work. She's a forest ecologist that really pioneered the concept of the sophisticated communication that happens between trees and between forests, not just trees next to each other, but miles apart. She really brought these ideas to the public eye. And this is stuff that we've learned about in my lifetime. We are still learning about old growth forests and all the things that go into them and all the things that create them and all the things that they do. So these are very, very, very special forests that take centuries to develop. Um, Time is the only thing that creates them. And so that's what the Old Growth Forest Network wants to give them. We want to give these old forests time and time to become even older. So you can't do a talk like this without talking about this slide, really. This is our disappearing virgin forest. And by virgin forest, that refers to forest that has never been logged in its existence. Of course, indigenous people have harvested timber for all sorts of reasons, but there was no scale of disturbance like there was when industrial logging proliferated. So that's what we're talking about here. This map is very similar for old growth forests too. So in 1620, you can see the black areas are where we had virgin forest here in the United States. By 1850, we had started to lose some, but by 1926, the Industrial Revolution had come and we are losing huge amounts. And by 1990, there's really hardly any virgin forest left. Um, However, we can't get our virgin forest back, um, but we can recover some forests from previous logging. So when we talk about old growth, sometimes we're talking about virgin forest. Most of the time, we're talking about forests that have been allowed to recover for a very, very, very long time. So, why do we care? Why do old growth forests matter? So many reasons. So high biodiversity and abundance. Obviously, we've been talking about all this complexity of the forest, and the complexity in the forest creates complexity of habitat, which creates all kinds of really wonderful places for all kinds of different creatures to live. So we have high biodiversity in old growth forests, and we also just plain have more creatures in old growth forests, right? We have more life. This is a study, to illustrate this, there was a study of this particular one salamander where they looked at they counted how many salamanders there were per acre in an old growth forest versus a second growth forest, meaning it had been cut once and allowed to grow back and was fully forest, versus a clear cut. And you can see the numbers. We have 488 per acre in the old growth. We have just 96 per acre in the second growth, and we have 0 in a clear cut. So we're definitely, we're definitely going to lose them if we do that. Another thing we talk about a lot with old growth forests are old growth obligate species. So anything that lives in the forest has a time and a place that it thrives. It has its niche, right? And so deer love the aftermath of a fire. They love all the new buds and everything. We know that, the tender new leaves. But on the other side of the spectrum, we have our old growth obligate species like the cavity nesting birds and owls that rely on that old growth character to thrive. And it can take hundreds of years to develop that habitat. So we want to hold on to it when we have it. One of those creatures is the brown creeper. As I'm sure a lot of you know, this is a specialized small bark foraging bird. They rely on mature, dense canopy trees for nesting and for foraging. And they require tall trees with deep, loose, shaggy bark because they nest behind that bark. I love this picture. Very, very cool bird. And they need the old growth forests. Another one is the Blackburnian warbler. They forage and nest in the topmost branches of the tallest conifers. They're primarily insect eaters, caterpillars, spiders, beetles, mayflies, that kind of thing. They start at the base of a branch and they work out. And they really love the upper canopy. And part of why they love the upper canopy is that there's not as much competition under there. They're one of the only, often the only warbler that's nesting in that upper canopy. So this is their niche. And we find them in the highest densities in, ta-da, old growth forests. And then my favorite, the American marten. Um, Not just because he's really cute, but he uses the American marten. They use the incredibly complex physical structures of the forest floor to create dens in tree cavities and logs and rock piles and ground burrows and stuff like that. They are omnivorous. They eat rodents and birds and fruit. And the thing that's so great for them about old growth forests is if you think about life as a marten and you need to go up the tree into a nest to get an egg or a bird or whatever you're going to get up there, um, you imagine that marten has to go across the forest floor, up the tree, get the food, down the tree, across the forest floor, up the next tree, get the food, down the tree, across the forest floor, and so on and so on. But in an old growth forest, the branches are spread and close enough, they're spread wide enough, and they touch each other. So the martin doesn't have to go down the tree every time. Now the martin gets to scurry right across the top and go nest to nest to nest to nest and get his food that way in a chain. So it saves the martin tons of energy to be in an older forest that has that kind of canopy that can support that kind of movement. So for these and other species that depend on old growth and mature forest ecosystems, once that habitat is destroyed, since it can take hundreds of years for it to develop again, this is really important, right? If an area is clear cut, the trees have to grow to their full lifespan. They have to decay over decades. They have to create in order to create that habitat for this certain species. And that can sometimes be too long of a timeline for a species. So we need to make sure that we have some of these older forests in our forest matrix across our forested lands, or we're not going to have these species that are dependent on old growth. And I want to talk a little bit about climate. Old growth forests are doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to climate crisis. And they do that by basically continuing to do what they do. It's continuing to sequester and store the carbon in their wood, their roots, and their leaves as they grow. They're holding it now, and if they stay standing, they will continue to hold it and continue to gather more. The oldest forests are generally storing the most carbon. And when we remove those trees, we're going to cut off their ability to do that. We're not just going to release the carbon that's in the tree, but we're also losing those hundreds of years worth of tree mass that's been holding that carbon. So in addition, allowing them to decompose in place is very important for returning the carbon to the soil and the fungal networks underground. We are big fans of the term proforestation, which is a climate approach that prioritizes leaving intact forests standing instead of removing them. Proforestation helps us address the climate crisis right now instead of waiting for a forest to regrow. Harvesting removes more carbon from old growth forests than any other factor. It adds carbon to the atmosphere from the soil disturbance, from the more rapid decomposition of what gets left behind, and then even from the emissions from the machinery and from the shipping of the wood. Now that I've said all of this, I want to be really clear that the Old Growth Forest Network knows very well that humans are a species that rely on wood products. We always have, and I think we always will. We are by no means saying that no forest should ever be cut. That is not our message. We know that forests need to be cut. We know that forests need to be managed. We know that we use wood products for all kinds of things, and we all use them. We are saying that when we choose which forests to cut, we should leave some of the oldest, wildest, messiest, most complex ones alone. Those are ones that are rare and they're supporting habitat that can't be recreated in our lifetime. And they are supporting life sometimes that can't exist anywhere else. So that's really what we're talking about in the Old Growth Forest Network. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about health and wellness. We all know that old forests make us feel really good. Sometimes we don't know why, but we certainly know that they make us feel good. There is now science that tells us that it helps with our blood pressure, it helps our immune system, and it helps with our anxiety and stress. It even increases our cognitive function and our creativity. Some studies have shown that there are benefits from actually inhaling the particular organic compounds that are produced by these complex ecosystems. And others show benefits from exposure to the especially diverse microorganisms in the soil. So on some level, these forests, they're magical beings. They're doing these incredible things that we can't see them do, but they're doing them, and they're wonderful. So, who is the Old Growth Forest Network? The Old Growth Forest Network is a national nonprofit. We are promoting and protecting old growth forests all across the country. The main way that we do this is through our network forest program. We are working with volunteers to identify one forest per county, wherever forests naturally grow, that demonstrates old growth character, or will one day. It has to be protected from logging, from commercial logging, and it has to be open to the public. Once we identify the best forest or one of the best forests in a county that meets all those criteria, we work with the forest owner to ensure that that forest is as protected as it can possibly be. And then we inform people of its location. And through this process, we're designating a national reserve of our country's oldest and wildest protected accessible forests. And at the same time, we're building a network of people who care about them. And that's all of you today. So on our website, there is this network forest map. We have 320 forests in 40 states so far. And we are inducting a new forest like every few weeks. We expect to probably be getting another 50 per year right now is kind of our rate. This is a map of the US forested counties. So all those little pieces are the different counties across the US. We are interested in all the ones that have any shade of green in them. Those are ones that have forest. And so we have our work cut out for us, but we are looking to have at least one in each county. And then these are the states with network forests currently. And again, in terms of our criteria, we're looking for old growth or mature second growth forest. We're looking for forests that allow public access, and we're looking for forests that are protected from commercial logging or timber harvesting. We're also looking for spectacular forests. We're looking for forests that will inspire, because this isn't just, I shouldn't say it that way. This is partly for educational purposes, right? This is because we want every single person in the United States to have access to an older forest and to feel what it feels like to be in one of those forests. And we want them to love that experience so that they will care about these forests. So that is our work, or that is the main thrust of our work, I should say. These are each dot is one of the old growth forest network forests in the Northeast. It doesn't matter what color it is. The darker ones are just the most recent ones that came into the network. And then these are the counties of New York State. And the green counties are counties where we have network forests and either shade of green. And the gray counties is where we don't currently have a volunteer helping us. So should you feel inspired at the end of this talk and you would like to work with us and be one of our county coordinators or volunteers who helps hike the trails and look at forests for us, if you're in one of those counties, we could really use you. And this is what it looks like sometimes when a forest gets inducted into the network. We often have some kind of gathering at the trailhead. We hand off a plaque to the forest owners, and then we take a guided hike in the forest and get to see the beautiful place that we've just inducted. So speaking of forests that have been inducted, yay, Monroe County. I see clapping. So Washington Grove, if you've never been there, you really very much should. This is a 26-acre oak hickory forest. It is, I believe, just 1 mile from the center of Rochester, which is shocking because it's gorgeous. Um, it is city owned. It has a beautiful, wonderful friends group called the Friends of Washington Grove that have done a huge amount of work in there, removing invasives and trash and working with the community. It's in a residential area. So it's like you're walking down the street and then you step into a wonderland. It's incredible. Um, as far as is known, the area has never been cleared, though the oldest trees have never been cored. They did age a dead tree that wasn't particularly big, and it was aged at 250 years. So there's some really lovely big old trees in Washington Grove, um, and a really stunning group of people who are caring for it as well. So check it out. And then fairly close to you in Ontario County is Wesley Hill Nature Preserve. Um, it is Finger Lakes Land Trust property. It's 435 acres, and it's got particularly large red and white oak and eastern hemlock and eastern white pine. 10 acres are original old growth forest, virgin forest, and another 200 acres of late successional forest. It's got sweeping views of the hills surrounding the lake, and it's got 5.5 miles of hiking trails. So another one that if you can get over there, that would be a great visit. It's the one that's behind me. And now I'm going to go through a little bit faster because I've got a few of these to show you. Um, if we go to the west and we go to Erie County, the Dr. Victor Reinstein Woods Nature Preserve is really beautiful. It's 76 acres of mature beech maple forest with a large percentage of black cherry trees and the largest forest-grown beech tree in New York State. And then in Cattaraugus County, the Zoar Valley Unique Area, um, another incredibly beautiful forest. It has 10 tree species that are the tallest in the state, believe it or not, which is that seems like a very large number to me for one forest, but I guess it's a really nice forest. And then this one is College Lodge Nature Preserve out in Chautauqua County. This one is on the SUNY Fredonia campus. And we have quite a few forests on college campuses. And then if we go to the east and we go over to Cayuga County, the Bahar Nature Preserve in Carpenter Falls, unique area. This is another Finger Lakes Land Trust property, and it's 53 acres for the Bahar Nature Preserve that is backed up right up against the Carpenter Falls unique area, which is state owned. And there's a beautiful waterfall. And my daughter looked at this picture and she was like, Mom, that's not a forest. That's farmland. That looks like patchwork farmland. I said, Yes, honey, it is. But see this beautiful swath in here? That is the Bear Swamp Creek Gorge, and the old growth forest is right down in the gorge, and then there's some other mature forest along the sides of that. So they've done a beautiful job. And there's also an ADA boardwalk access to the falls, which is quite a cool thing. We have Green Lakes State Park in Onondaga County. That's 1,000 acres of old growth, which is just a huge amount for where we are now. A lot of sugar maple on the hillsides, and tulip poplars. Uh, and it has the Green Lake and Round Lake, which are, I just learned about them. They're rare meromictic lakes with a funny color. They're like green blue color because the water layers don't mix for decades or millennia. So the density difference in the water makes those lakes different colors. And in Tompkins County, we have Fisher Old Growth Forest, um, known for high number of tree species here, including yellow oak, which is a locally rare species. I've seen a lot of gorgeous pictures of that forest. If we go up north, we've got Ampersand Mountain, um, original forest, unlogged forest, right upon entry. So you don't have to go far. Sometimes you have to kind of go in through some younger forest to get to the old growth. This one, the old growth is right there when you first enter the trail. And then at Paul Smith's College, there's the Doc Kudish Natural Forest. So this is a 75-acre stand of hemlock northern hardwood, and it was maintained for educational purposes. Paul Smith's is a forestry school, and so this is a tract that they set aside specifically so that they could study old growth and let the students see today what forests looked like before 1850. It's pretty cool. And then if we go farther east, we have the George Landis Arboretum in Schoharie County. This is a 30-acre old growth forest. It's got two trails through it. The trees range in age from 150 to 300 years. And the executive director of the George Landis Arboretum is an incredible teacher and speaker, and he's often on the radio. His name is Fred Breglia. So that is someone I would look up and go listen to his talks. He's fascinating and wonderful. And then in the Catskills, we've got Big Indian Wilderness area. This is, like I said, part of the Catskill Forest Preserve. And this is northern hardwood hemlock forest. Sorry, it's Ulster County. And then as we continue south, here's another college forest. This is South Woods Old Growth Forest. That's at Bard. It's 70 acres of virgin forest. They have and it's a 1 mile carriage road that goes down the middle of it to the river. And um, it's got ancient hemlocks and oaks and maples and some young beech and pine. It goes right down to the Hudson, and you can see it all in this 1 mile carriage road. It's pretty remarkable. And then in Westchester County, Rockefeller State Park Preserve, towering tulip trees, uncut since 1860. It's about 30 miles north of New York City. It's part of a big and celebrated preserve with 1,400 acres of preserved forest. It's a really neat one. And last but not least, Inwood Hill Park, Shirakapak Preserve, is on the island of Manhattan. It is the only remaining natural forest on the island. It is thick, deciduous secondary forest and with mature red oak and some of the largest tulip trees in the city. And it is particularly fascinating because in this forest, there are also caves that were used by the Lenape Native American tribes as shelters in prehistoric times through the 17th century. So, and they're there. You can walk right up to them. It's a very moving thing. There's part of me that's torn of whether we should be able to walk right up to them or not. But being able to do it also is a very, very moving experience. Anyway, there are many, many more forests in New York State. We have 26 in the state so far. Um, and New York City itself has six. So that's a little guide through the state of New York uh, network forests. So hopefully now you're saying, great, how can I get involved? So one way to get involved is you can come explore some of these forests. You can go on our website, look at our network map. This is a clickable map. You can go in and click on every one of these little trees, and it'll give you all the information that you need. There's also a list by state and by county. So you can find visitor information, you can find forest descriptions, you can find trail recommendations, pictures, anything you need is here for our network forests. And if you really, really love it and you're loving going to these forests and you would like to volunteer for the Old Growth Forest Network, we are always looking for volunteers to help us choose the next forests to come into the network. And that just basically means we'd like you to walk the trails for us. I am here in my office in Massachusetts, and I cover all of New England and the state of New York. So I can go online and learn how many acres a forest is and what kind of trees might be there, or maybe even the age. But I can't tell what it feels like to be in the forest. And that is really the work of our volunteers. They go out on the trail and they say, I hiked these two trails and this one was better. And let me tell you why. And then they go and hike another one and compare it to that one. That's really the job. It's a great job. If you would like to do it, we'd love to have you. If you know of a forest that you think should be part of the Old Growth Forest Network, you can nominate a forest on our website. Um, or you can just email me and nominate a forest. We have 3 different registries where we honor forests. One is our network forest registry. These are the forests that we've been talking about, one per county. We try to find the highest quality, largest forest open to the public, protected from logging that we can find. We also have 2 other registries. One is our community forest registry. And this registry is specifically for forests that are doing the work to bring the community in. So they're community focal points, they're doing outreach, education, recreation, they're bringing in the public and they're teaching about forests and why they're so great. And this is 100 Acres Nature Park, which is in Monroe County. And there is this fantastic, very small group of people who took this town forest or city forest under their wing and decided that this was going to be their legacy to their children, that they were going to protect this forest and do the work of really stewarding this forest for the future. So they do all kinds of programs, and they've been doing invasives work. They've been doing tree planting. They've been naming trees after people to bring the community in. They've been doing it all, and they're really fantastic people, and it's a really beautiful forest. So check it out if you can. And then we also have our private forest registry. So our private forest registry came to be because we had all these, through our work with the network forests, we realized that we would have private forest owners come to us and say, hey, I own a forest and I don't want to ever see it logged. And I want to protect it and I want it to be here forever. And I'm not going to log it and get the funding that would come from that. I'm making the commitment to my forest that it's going to stay here. And for those people, we have our private forest registry. So these can be public forests or private forest. They can, the name is a little bit confusing now because they can be open to the public or not open to the public. They are privately owned forests. And so you can have people on your land or not have people on your land. And but it's for folks who are really making a strong commitment to protecting their forests, whether they're open to the public or not. And for these two registries that I just told you about, we're not just choosing one per county. We can have many, many, many community forests and many, many, many private forests. We also do all kinds of public education partnerships. We guide hikes. We do talks like this tonight. We have tables at events. We go into schools. We can partner with you if you have a group or an organization that you work with and would like somebody to come and talk or come and do an activity. We are available. And then for forests that are coming into the network, sometimes we will invite a forest to come into the network, and through that process, we will be checking on the protections documentation and realize that the protections documentation isn't quite strong enough for them to qualify for the network. And a lot of forests out there, people will say, oh, nobody would ever cut this forest. Everybody knows this forest is, it's our crown jewel of our town and nobody would ever touch it. And I will say, great, show me where that's written. And when they come back to me and say, oops, it's not actually written anywhere, then we can work with them to get that in writing. And so a lot of organizations, a lot of forest owners of various different kinds have worked with us on getting that wording in writing, getting it as part of the management plan or part of the easement or some kind of addendum so that it's actually in writing for their forest in perpetuity. And then on our website, we have a rapidly growing, really rich resources page that includes all kinds of different publications, including all the incredible books by our founder, Joan Maloof. If you have not read any of her books, you really, really should. She's just an excellent writer, and they're wonderful, wonderful books to read. And she has a number of them on various different subjects regarding old growth forests. So definitely check those out. We also have all sorts of videos and related resources from our partners. We also are the place where the Northeastern Old Growth Conference houses their talks. So the Northeastern Old Growth Conference happens once every 2 years. And we are the place where those talks get collected after the conference. So you can go and look at them afterwards. You can also get information about how to go to the conference. I should say that as well. And last but not least, join our mailing list. We have 2 paper publications a year. They are on fully tree-free paper, and otherwise it's 4 quarterly e-newsletters. And if there's an event in your state, we'll let you know about those events as well. So that's it. I will make sure that that Julie has all my contact information and can send that out to you. So if anybody would like to get on the mailing list or be a part of the network in any way, whether you have a forest or you want to hike a forest or you have a question about a forest, you can get in touch with me. So that is it for me. I'm happy to open it up to questions.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Johnson. I'm from Wayne County.
Hi, Jimmy.
Yep, and I'm the property manager of the Zurich Bog, which is owned by the Birds and Swamp Preservation Society. Are you familiar with it?
I am not.
Yeah. Anyways, we do have an old growth area that sits in the middle of the bog swamp. And it's classical pits and mounds on the top. All my historical reference says it's never been logged because it's too much swampy ground to get there.
Sure.
And it's full of tip ups.
Great.
And I guess I would like to somehow authenticate its old growth forest. And I'm not sure. We are a private organization, but we are open to the public. The trail is open. Would you be interested in seeing it, or?
I would be interested in knowing more. Let's see, how should we do this? So that I would love to get your information. And I will contact you, or you can email me. Can you email me after this presentation and remind me that you have a bog that's never been logged and that we are very interested in that. That sounds like a very good candidate, maybe for the private forest registry, and that would be an interesting thing to talk about.
Okay, I'll email you.
Okay, beautiful.
Shelley, do you have anything to add? Like my partner Shelley's out there. Did you have anything to add?
Well, this is Fred here. I'll say something. There were actually 4 of us listening to you tonight who were on that property Wednesday. And the property that he's talking about, it's about a half a mile long, 40-foot high drumlin, glacial drumlin, perched up above the swamp that goes around it. So it probably wasn't logged because it would have been difficult to get the logs out, and water level was probably actually higher back when any logging was done there. But a lot of fallen trees, a lot of pits and mounds, and you know, Bruce Gilman was one of the 4 that was with us, and he's listening tonight too. So, and Shelley Walker, who's a high school science teacher. So the 4 of us are actually planning to do some work out there this summer probably, and some's been done before already too. But yes, it's a privately owned site, as Jimmy said, but there's a 2-mile loop trail that goes around it that is public and is available. Your website has information on that, and anyway,
tell me the name of it again.
I'll stop rambling. But I do think it qualifies, and it's in Wayne County, which you do not have.
Oh, it's in Wayne. Okay, awesome.
Yes, yeah, it's north of Newark.
Can you tell me the name of it again, Fred?
Zurich Bog, which is spelled the same as the city in Switzerland.
Okay. Zurich Bog.
And it's
happy to know about Zurich Bog. Thank you so much.
You Google Zurich Bog and you'll find stuff about it. But as Jimmy said, it's owned by the Burgeon Swamp Preservation Society.
Okay.
Burgeon Swamp being another area that is somewhat similar, but I don't know if there's any old growth forest over there.
Okay. I know Burgeon has been logged, a lot of it.
Yeah. Okay. I suspect that's true.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. And yeah, you're right. That is swampiness or steep hillsides. These are the things that saved our old growth
orchids out there.
What's that?
What are there, Jimmy? A dozen different orchids out there through the season?
Yes, there's at least a dozen wild orchids.
Awesome. Sounds
incredible. They're not in the forest. Well, 1 or 2 of them might be. The coral roots might be, but most of them are in the wetlands around it.
Great. Sounds like a great candidate.
Cool.
And I was just going to say that those sorts of conditions are really what saved the old growth forests that are left, are mostly left because they were in some place that was very, very hard to log, either because
Washington
it was boggy
Grove.
or because
Washington
it was
Grove, for example. It's in a hole, right? Around a hill.
Yep. Yep.
Very cool. So I have a question. Maybe it's a dumb one. So in the how long would it take for a forest that had been logged or clear cut to become an old growth forest? Like thousands of years, or like we have 2 properties Bank does that we are hoping to preserve for the next centuries. How long will it take, or is it just we just can't get back to it?
I think it again really depends on the forest in terms of how each individual ecosystem, right? It depends on how it was logged. Was it clear cut? Was it selectively logged? Like that's going to change things. And it also really depends on your definition of old growth, right? Some people will say, up 200 years. It has to be, they have to have, it's got to be 200 years old and then it's old growth. But, or it has to be 150 or it has to be 100. Or they'll say something entirely different where it has to have, we have to see if for this particular type of forest, we want to see not just the characteristics that I talked about tonight, but other characteristics that are specific to that particular kind of forest, right? They're going to be looking for those. So, in terms of, that the definition of old growth is a slippery one because every forest is different. If you have a forest that you're hoping will become that you're protecting such that it can become old growth in the future, I would just call that a future old growth forest. And for our purposes, for the Old Growth Forest Network, we're not out there aging trees. We're not out there measuring things. We are looking comparatively at all the forests in one county. And the one that gives us, that feels the oldest, that has those old growth characteristics, maybe has some really interesting history. Maybe we know because it has been aged, but maybe we don't. Maybe we're in a county where there isn't really like old growth that anybody's looking at. It's just, it's a county that most things have been cut, everything's second growth, right? Then we're looking for a particularly high quality forest, a forest that maybe has some other things about it that are important. We have a forest, for instance, in Plymouth County, Massachusetts, sort of near the Cape, right before you get out onto the Cape. It's a pretty young forest, but it has a series of kettle ponds that support a couple of different plant species. One of them is a certain kind of gentian, these different flowers. There's two of them that are so rare they only exist in like 6 other places in the world. And so that little forest that's pretty young but is surrounding and protecting these ponds with these plants sort of on the edges and around them is an absolutely miraculous place. And if you keep walking, you walk from one end all the way through to the other end, you are going to eventually end up in the shopping mall. So it's, Plymouth County doesn't have a ton of old growth, but what it has is this super special forest that has these super special plants in it. And this very, very rare ecosystem. And so we decided that's the one that was going to come into the Old Growth Forest Network. And that's our old growth of the future. So we are very clear on our website that when we describe a forest, if it's a virgin forest, we will tell you. If it's a young forest, we'll tell you. If it's second growth, we'll tell you. If it's we'll let you know what you're looking at. We're not claiming that every forest that goes into the network is virgin forest by any stretch, or even that they're all old growth. They aren't. We have some very young forests in the network, but they came into the network either because they, maybe in part because they had some special thing like this one that I described. And sometimes it's because there's a certain organization that has made such a strong commitment to protecting that forest that that's the one that rose above the others. If everything else was equal, we're going to go with the one with the stronger protections, right? The way we choose forests has a lot to do with things, has to do with age, but not always with age, because it's this county by county comparison.
I see. I was, yeah, I guess, yeah.
No, no, go ahead.
That answers my question. But I was also thinking just in terms of like, and I don't even know the type of woods these are, but just how long would it take for the ecosystem to like bounce back to approximating what it was before it was farmed or
Right.
cut.
A very, very, very long time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Because,
Okay.
you know, if you think about it, when forests began, right, before we were here, they didn't just suddenly like all the trees grow up all at once. Things came in, other things came in. Those virgin forests are a particular thing that can't really be repeated once a forest has been cleared, right? It can't at all be repeated once a forest has been cleared. I don't know if you've ever like walked through a forest where you just couldn't walk because the trees were so skinny and close together that there was no way to get through. That's often because the forest was clear cut or was farmed. And then when it grew back, all the trees grew up at the same time. So they're all these little spindly trees, right? So if you think about it, you have to wait for those spindly trees to grow up and then to fall, and then the next trees to come in and sort of do that patchwork thing of growing in so that then they become different age classes, different sizes, and you start to have the different the complexity that we're talking about. It takes hundreds of years for that to happen, which is why when people ask how old is an old growth forest, we start talking in hundreds, right?
Right.
But I'm sorry, it's not a very direct answer.
No,
But yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
And then Yuta had a question in the chat. What might be differences between decisions for a private owner to have their old growth property protected by a land trust or through the OGFN or both?
Yeah. Really good question. So the Old Growth Forest Network, we don't hold easements, right? A land trust is going to hold an easement for you, which is a legally binding document. Old Growth Forest Network does not produce legally binding documents ourselves. We can work with you with your land trust to shift the wording on your easement or on your management plans and things like that. But we don't supply any legally binding protection. We advise you on how to do it, and we also have a memorandum of agreement that we use. And so that is, again, not a legally binding document, but it's a document that states your intent. So if somebody comes to us and they have they have their own forest and they want it to be part of the private forest registry in the Old Growth Forest Network, if they don't have any other protections on their forest, we will ask them to sign a memorandum of agreement that basically says this forest is never going to be cut. I'm making this commitment. And so that document works for us because it becomes part of our files. It is something that we can point to, right? And it becomes part of your files so that if your forest gets passed on to the next generation, there's something in writing in your files that says that your intent was for that forest to stay unlogged and to continue to grow. But it's not the same as an easement. So a land trust will protect it legally. We can't do that. We can encourage you to work with a land trust. We can help you with your wording. We can provide this memorandum of agreement, but we don't have the ability to do a legally binding document for you. The memorandum of agreement is free the legally binding document you need to pay for. For some people, they don't have the wherewithal financially to do the legally binding work. So the memorandum of agreement is their first step towards letting the public know, letting the next people to own that property know what their intention was. And hopefully then eventually that can get into a legal state. That make sense?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. That make the very clear.
Good.
In some ways, it seems like the old growth forest network is like an honorary.
Yes.
I don't know how to quite say it, but it's an honor to be recognized by the organization.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So organizations that become part of the network, because there's only one in each county usually, yes, it's a feather in their cap. It's something that they can point to and say, look, we got chosen. There's funding that sometimes can come with that. They also get our support. If they need letters of support for something, we can be a partner in that. And we're also truly a network. We're a network of people who own, who love, who study, and who care about forests. And so if I have a forest owner, for instance, somebody just was looking to induct their forest into our private forest registry, and they told me that in their forest was I think it was a 30-meter by 30-meter plot that someone had set up to study old growth, that was going to be their old growth study plot, and that every 5 years they were going to take various measurements and do this thing. And the person who set it up, since he set it up, passed away. And the person's son wanted to continue this plot work, but really didn't have the education or to know what to do. But his dad had left all these incredible detailed notes, but he needed a scientist to help him weed through the notes and figure out what the next step would be. And so we were able to connect him to scientists right in his county who could help him to do that. So there's the network, and then there's the network, right? There's the network of forests, and then there's the network of people. And there's lots and lots of different ways that we all support each other. And yes, you're right. It's an honor to be inducted into the network, and it's something that you can point to for any number of reasons, whether it's funding or whether it's publicity or whether it's letting the next generation of your family know your intention for that forest. If you put it into the network, that's a pretty clear sign that you did not want that forest to be logged. And we have some paperwork to follow that up.
Well, it's a fascinating talk. And I'm Tom Howard.
Hi, Tom.
Hi. I'm the coordinator for Onondaga County.
Yes, it's nice to actually see you.
Yeah, I know. Good to see you too. And this is a great talk. And I'm very familiar with Green Lake State Park. And I haven't been there in a long time. I've got mobility issues.
Mhm.
You know, I don't have a vehicle. That's what the issue is. But there's places right near where I live, like Liverpool, New York High School has an old growth forest right on its property.
Oh, wow.
About 11 acres of sugar maple and beech. And the sugar maple trees are really, really ancient. You know, there's one that's over 4.5 feet in diameter. That's forest grown. That's exceptional.
Mm.
And we think it's over 400 years old.
Wow.
Cool. And the funny thing is, there's a wheelchair accessible path, paved trail, that as soon as you go in that path, there's you're in the old growth, 120-foot tall trees, and 200 plus years old.
Wow.
And then hopefully that'll be preserved. They say it's forever wild, but I'm not 100% that's going to be preserved. And
Do they do Do they do education in that forest? Is it
I
just
really,
kind of there for the public, or do they do education with their students and the public?
I really don't know. I know they
Hmm.
don't do anything for the public.
Okay.
This area has had some difficulties.
Yeah.
Like you have a big project coming in. You've heard of Micron, I think.
I have not.
It's a big semiconductor manufacturing
Okay.
company. They're going to build one of the largest chip factories in the world.
Yes,
And
I have heard this.
they have cleared 340 acres of forest about in the town of Clay. That's about 5 miles or more from where I live. I don't know if it's old growth or not, but it's been cleared.
Okay. That's sad.
And then, but we do have other sites that are like we have the Wizard of Oz Memorial Oak Grove, a strange name, at Syracuse Junior High School. That's walking distance from where I live. And we believe L. Frank Baum he grew up near there, and he was inspired by the Great Forest. And we think that's the original Great Forest. You know,
Wow.
it's speculation. And there have been classes out there years ago. I've been involved with this for 30 years. We've had people help out with it. And, you know, we've had classes, we've taken classes through, and it's mostly old growth oaks.
Wow.
200
Tom, what was the name of that high school again?
The high school is Liverpool, New
No,
York.
the first one was Liverpool, but what's the Wizard of Oz in?
That's North Syracuse Junior High School.
North Syracuse Junior High School.
Then we have I grew up right next to an ancient oak forest, right here in the village. I've been most of my life in this village, and by the cemetery in North Syracuse.
Okay.
So 200 to 300-year-old oaks.
Wow.
So they're around here.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, the one in Liverpool is the most accessible old forest I know of anywhere.
Well, that one seems like a really, really good candidate for the private forest registry or possibly the community forest registry if they're doing education work in there.
They are,
That would be a great one for the community forest registry because it is so accessible. But if it's not really open to the public and it's just for the school children, or children, high schoolers, then, you know, that would be a great candidate for the private forest registry if they were interested.
Maybe they are. I don't know. I have no contact with them.
Okay. I could reach out. I'll reach out and see what see what they think.
Yeah, they own that property, and also North Syracuse School District owns the Wizard of Oz Grove. That's another one. We've taken people through there. There's a beautiful trail that goes through there. And you have a place we call the Forest Cathedral. The oaks are about 110 feet high and over 200 years old. And it's
That's amazing.
There. It's right here. All this stuff's right here.
Okay.
So
I got to come visit you, Tom.
Yeah.
You need to. Yeah.
Clearly.
That would be great. Great to have you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us about those.
Yes, I love all this networking. And now I have my travel itinerary planned out for all these places to go. It's wonderful. We just have 2 questions on the chat, and then we might need to let you go. It's already after 9.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, we can talk all night about this. So Mary Gordon is asking, could she find a contact like you in Southern Ohio on the website?
Yes.
Okay. So all the if you go to your website, there's all the people, the local.
Yes. Brian Kane. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. And then Sue is asking, for example, if a property like Zurich Bog got an old growth forest designation from you, would you provide letters of support for grant applications for conservation work at the property? Is that something you're able to do?
Yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those were actually quick answers. Is there anybody? We'll have time for one more question, comment. Otherwise, we'll let you go. And thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a total joy to talk to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. All right. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Jane.
Night.
Lily. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Night, John.
Night, Mary.
John, thank you.
Night, John boy.
Good night, Jab Boy. Good night, Grandpa.
Night.
That's it.